This is the Reluctant Leader Podcast, the podcast designed to help you step out of the shadows and become an inspirational leader. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and each episode I will be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. I'll be picking their brains for those golden nuggets that will help you be the best you can be. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing at thereluctantleader.co.uk, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's get on with the show. Today I'm talking to Steve Jones, who is a well-known business coach, public speaker, trainer and consultant. Steve is an expert in creating ideas and strategies that build businesses, drive revenue and improve business position and performance. He has a passion for making companies and their products the best in their product category. Steve's unique understanding of leadership and management, team building and motivation in business, coupled with his understanding, drive and enthusiasm, clearly set him aside as an expert in his field. Looking forward to speaking to Steve today. Hope you get lots of value from it, and I will catch you all on the other side. So welcome, Steve, to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Thanks, Mark. It's a great pleasure to connect with you and do this podcast.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. I'm sure there'll be loads of value for our listeners. But before we get into the topic, which is engagement today, what I'd like to know, and I'm sure everybody else is interested, is to know why you do what you do, and what was the pivotal moment that started you doing what you do?
Okay, well, let me tell you my story. That'd be easier. So my background was health and fitness management. So I was with Fitness First PLC when we had one club on the South Coast. I left when we were the largest in the world. We did it in 7 years. So I went through the AIM, the full listing, became the largest independent health club chain in the world. And then we were opening a club a week at 1.2 worldwide. So it was fantastic, fast growth, very, very exciting, very entrepreneurial. But when the city got hold of it, it started to lose its magic for me. When it became more about the shareholder than it did about the punter coming in and the dynamic of health and fitness, I got a bit disillusioned and I left. So I didn't do anything for 6 months. I walked up and down the beach, a bit like a hobo, wondering what I'd do next with my Jack Russell. And then I thought, well, I could probably help a few companies grow. So I started to help companies with their growth issues. And that had a bit of success. And then SureLaws, an international coaching organisation, coming to the UK from Australia, decided they'd like me to engage with them. So I went to see what they were doing, and it was fantastic because all their tools, methodologies, techniques mapped perfectly with the Fitness First journey. So I had the experience plus the toolkit. And I worked with my clients with them for 3 years, but something was missing for me. And the bit that was missing for me, I noticed, was I was dealing with lots of fast growth businesses, but they couldn't grow that rapidly because they either couldn't keep their talent or they couldn't attract talent. So it became a sort of pinch point in their business. So I started to look at the leadership issues, the motivational issues, the engagement issues of how you can take a company and keep your talent and grow and attract talent, become an employer of choice. At the same time I was doing that, the government task force team were looking at employee engagement in the UK because it was so poor. Only 1 in 3 people in the workplace were engaged, so 2/3 of the population disengaged. If we were all motivated, we were all doing a 4-day working week, and we were ranked 14th in Europe behind some third world countries. So I sort of looked at this and thought, crikey, okay. So I got invited onto the task force team. And it really went from there because I started to look at what the research they'd found, and I built courses, and I went to my local accountant and said, look, can I play with this stuff with your business? And they said, yeah, sure. And a year later, they started winning awards, and then they recommended me to their top client, Ace Technologies. I went in and did a year-long program with them, and they started winning awards. So I kind of knew I had a program that worked. So I kind of fell into the engagement space because of what I was seeing more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's an impressive story. Obviously, you've gone down a path. You probably didn't quite know where you were going, but sometimes you just have to take the next step and see where it takes you.
Well, it was interesting, Mark, because we were both motivational maths practitioners. Mm-hmm. I realised that I didn't fit in the Fitness First journey going forwards because it had become too much of a corporate animal, and it was more about the politics rather than the work. So, it's interesting. You kind of you then have to make decisions. You're forced into making decisions, really. So, and I kind of knew that I wanted to do something about giving back, and I think coaching is a great way of doing that.
Yeah, and that's that making a difference drive is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, so
it's so prevalent these days as well. People want to make a difference, and if they don't feel they are making a difference, then they're looking elsewhere to see where they can.
Yeah, exactly. And that, it comes back to the Simon Sinek why stuff. If you know why, and I know you're big on that. So why do you do what you do? If you know why you do what you do, I kind of worked out early on in my career that actually I'd spend most of my life sleeping, the rest of it working, and have some social time. So whatever I did in that piece about work had to be of value. And if I didn't enjoy it, don't moan, move on.
Yeah. And I've only just read something today, actually. It's funny how things pop out and you think, wow, that's quite a statistic. And that's 9 out of 10 people go to work and not really bothering what they do as long as they get paid, which is a sad statistic. But we know that's sort of changing because we know that a lot of people will move away from a job if they don't feel as if it's fulfilling. And that's the challenge going forward, isn't it? It's making sure that we keep those good people on board.
Well, I think that is the challenge with the millennials coming into the workplace now. They want a purpose, and if they can't, and they've got no loyalty, so they'll go where they're wanted, basically.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So it is changing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to be talking about engagement today, and I think the first question would be the obvious question to me is, what is engagement?
Yeah, it's a good question because I heard someone say, well, you'll know it when you see it. It's quite true, actually. When you walk into an organisation, you can feel it and sense it when it's right, and you can definitely feel and sense it when it's wrong. Yeah. So what is it? So I think that's what the Engage for Success movement was all about, working out, well, what is it? And for me, it's about, you have to have a story. You have to have a story that people, people buy an emotion. So if you're joining an organisation, it's not about what you do. It's about why you do what you do, and getting enough people to believe in you as an organisation and join you for those reasons. So having your story about where you've come from, where you are, where you're going is critical, I think, and communicating that fully so people could buy into a purpose. And I think it was Napoleon said, I can't get anybody to die for money, but I can get them to die for a medal.
Yeah, yes. And what I've learned by these podcasts so far is that people will buy into a concept or a story that fires them up, and it just by giving them money is not generally enough these days. It's got to be something that is more than that. It's got to be, there's something more than just money at the end of the day. That's what keeps them engaged. Yeah.
Money's short term. They need a cause, a purpose, a reason, and then you'll get the best out of people. Yeah.
So as I've put in the notes for the podcast, you've written a book recently, which I've just finished reading, which is fabulous, especially as it's based around motivational maps, as you mentioned. We're both using that product. Yeah. So what was the inspiration for that book?
Basically, I co-wrote it with James Sale. It's called Mapping Motivation for Engagement, and the inspiration around it was I had some success with a couple of clients. I mean, we turned Inspire Professional Services on their head because the owner was 10 years into his business. He had left a top 4 accountancy firm, and he was about to work with entrepreneurs to make them great. And 10 years in, he started to look at his business, and it started to look like the company he had left, which did not motivate him at all. So I went in really with the program to say, right, okay, let's get back to your essence about what you believe. And that kind of sparked it, really, getting them back to their why, which was to help entrepreneurs grow. And based on that, we did a program with their senior management team, which eventually led them to winning lots of awards and reshaping their whole business and getting back to loving their clients and working hard for their clients. There was a casualty because one of the directors left as a result of it, but that was the right thing. Yeah. So I can't remember the original question, Mark. Sorry.
Well, it was the inspiration for the book, really. What you actually,
So we did a couple of these, and then I realised actually And then James was looking, he's obviously been commissioned to write 7 books. This is one of them.
Yeah.
So he approached me and said, look, I've seen the work you're doing. And Motivational Maths was instrumental in it, which the book is talked about a lot. So it just came along, and it was the right thing at the right time, I think.
Yeah. And I meant to just finish reading it. The strong bits about the book is particularly those case studies, which are at the back of the book, that really emphasise the importance of engagement and using the right tools and bringing everybody on board with the vision of the business. And we'll talk a bit more about the vision in a bit. And also the activities within the book. There's loads of ways that you can use to bring the book alive. It's not just a book that you just put on the shelf. It's something that you can actually pick up and say, right, well, pick something out of the book and use one of the activities, which is that, they're all really, really useful.
Yeah, I mean, we all need a toolkit. If you're going, you and I go into businesses, we need a toolkit, and we need something that works with clients. Otherwise, we're going to get thrown out and not get paid. So I worked very hard to find things that actually were relevant and would shift the business in the right direction. So the tools in the book, they're not all mine. Some of them are James's, but a lot, so it's a combination of our thinking around it. But they work, and they do get people to think differently. And we had to, especially in the second business I went into, which was a second generation business where you had old school and new school. So it was very, very tough because we had a board and a senior management team of a mixture of the new and the old, and we had to get everybody harmonised. Because if you're going to do an employee engagement strategy in an organisation, it can't be another HR initiative, otherwise it will fail. It's got to be part of the overall strategy, and everybody's got to be on board. So we had a few battles in the early days to get people to understand the value of doing it.
Yeah. Coming from a family business background, that definitely resonates for me when going to the next generation from the business that my dad started. From transformation from one to the other is a challenge in all businesses. As the new people come in.
Yeah, so it depends on how good those new people are, doesn't it? Sometimes they'll excel the business, and sometimes they won't. So
yes, absolutely. Yes. So moving on from the book then, if we delve a bit more deeply into what engagement is, what do you think are the main barriers for engagement within the workplace?
Well, I've developed a bit of a tool. I think we spoke about it briefly before we came on air, to look at engagement. And I think there's eight things you need to look at, and just score yourself. 1 0 to 10. 10 is yes, I've got it, and 0 I haven't. It'll kind of give you a sense of where you are. Yeah. So the first one is do you have a story? Now, it doesn't mean to say that story is communicated, but do you have a story? Do you have a story about where you've been, where you are, where you're going? Does that story exist? And if it does, dig it out. Second thing is, do you have a clear vision? Do you know where you're going to be in the next 3 years? Have you planned it? Have you strategized it? Yeah. Now, if you just take the story and the vision and score those two, then the next question is the killer question. Is that totally communicated throughout your whole organization? Is it on your website? Do your staff know it? Is it in your induction program? Would the cleaner know what it was? Would they know your story? Would they know your vision? Because typically it stops. If it exists at all, it stops with the senior management team. Yes. And there's an assumption it happens in the business. And also with the story, you may have a fantastic story, but you get so busy you forget to tell it, and people coming in don't know it. Yeah. So really make sure that story is told. And then you go into the engaging manager space, and you need managers that don't just have a managerial title, that they actually engage with the managers, with the people, the staff. So do they coach, motivate and stretch people on a day-to-day basis, or do they just have a title? Okay. Yeah. And one of the challenges there is not seeing this as additional duties to your current role. It is your role, basically. You are there to lead and manage.
Like a culture, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then you move into the employee voice space, and Richard Branson would say he employs people so they can tell him what to do, not the other way around. Yeah. So do you have that listening culture? Do you get people involved early in decision making? Do you listen to them? Do you get their ideas, or do you have this learned helplessness where people have given up actually giving ideas because no one's taken any notice? Yeah. The next question would be, do you have a set of values? Doesn't matter whether they're communicated, but do you have a set of values? And if those values exist, are they lived and breathed, evidenced is there evidence around it, and are they communicated? So are there consequences to not doing them and rewards for doing them? Mm-hmm. If you get all those 8 things right, you're going to have an engaged workforce. And the flip side of that is millennials or people coming into your work will look for that. They'll look for a company that has a story, that has a vision, that communicates it, that has engaging managers, that coaches and motivates and stretches staff, that listens to them, that has a set of values that they live and breathe. So they're going to look for those things. And if they don't find it in the organisation, they're going to be selective about where they go. Yeah. And they won't be working for you. And that's why companies can't actually attract talent and grow.
Right.
So that's my take on it.
That's a pretty comprehensive list of things that people need to do then. Yeah. You know, and it all absolutely makes sense. So these are, when we say barriers, these are the typical things that business owners and leadership teams get wrong.
Yeah, they don't. When I've done this enough times, I've got a wheel. So so people score it. Yeah. And then when we join the dots up on the wheel, that's their engagement wheel going down the road. And they get quite a shock when they realise how actually out of shape that wheel is. Right. And then we go, well, it doesn't matter what shape it is. It's actually you've got to get it back to actually being fully inflated and right. So there's work to be done. And usually, you'll know this, it falls down on 2 areas key. They don't tell their story. They don't communicate they don't have a vision. They don't communicate it. And it's the leadership. 9 times out of 10, it's the leadership that fails. If you get the leadership right, you're going to get the listening right. And if you get the leadership right, you're probably going to get the story right. So they have a knock-on effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems to all make sense. Which ones out of those? I mean, you've mentioned it actually. The story and the leadership are the ones typically that you go in and you find are where you need to start work. Well, it's basically like polishing a diamond. It does exist in the business. You just got to actually get it to the surface. Yeah. As far as the story's going and the vision. And start to sort of really get some interest and some energy around your story, because every SME, I don't know, you'll be the same, Mike. You'll go into SMEs, they've got fantastic stories, but they talk about their products. They don't talk about their journey and their story. Talk about your story. And that is where we talk about the why, and that's the important thing, and that's what people connect to. Employees connect to it, customers connect to it, why they buy from them, all those things. It's such an important part, and it's so easy just to forget it as if it doesn't matter, but it's actually one of the most important things about a business and why it exists.
Yeah, well, people focus too much on the money, the outcome. Unfortunately, but I heard someone told me years ago, if you want to earn more money, tell a better story. And it's so true. You tell a better. I could have said I used to work for Fitness First, but my story is fastest ever growth business in the UK. Over 7 years, part of the management team, blah, blah. So I've got a story, and the story actually gets people to buy into you on a credible basis, and also they're interested. It shows why you got to where you are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So just delving a bit more into the book, and this is something that I hadn't really come across before, and that was the McLeod report. And within that report, it mentions 4 things, which are in line with what you just mentioned. Actually, the 4 things that you tell me. You probably know more about it than me.
Well, the 4 things are: you have to have a strategic narrative. So that is the story, that is the vision, and that has to be communicated throughout the whole organisation. Yeah. The engaging managers is the second one. So managers that actually engage staff, coach, manage, stretch staff on a day-to-day basis. And then the employee voice was the listening thing I was talking about. And the fourth one was integrity, where you have a set of values, but you don't have a say do. It's actually you live and breathe those values. So those are, there's only 4 things in organisations that get it right. So it's not difficult to address this issue. It's just actually giving it the time it deserves. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've already mentioned them. So where do motivational maps fit in with this? How can they be used with all these things that we've talked about?
Well, I think they underpin a lot of it because people will join because of their why. Their why is their motivational maps why, and the business's why. So sometimes your why and the business why has to align. So that's why it's important to have a story, because people will join an organisation because of what they believe. And if they understand their motivations as well, they'll join. So in recruitment, it's important. Actually, a lot of managers spend loads of time trying to guess how to motivate staff and get it wrong. 9 times out of 10, no matter how well you know someone, you may not know what motivates them, and motivation is quite dynamic and changeable as well, as you know. What motivated someone yesterday won't be the same the next day necessarily. So giving managers the tools to actually be able to understand what motivates and drives people enables them to press the right buttons and reward them. So it affects engaging managers. If you think about the listening, the employee voice as well, if you are smart with motivational maps, then you'll get employees to start to communicate to you about their needs and their wants. And if they do that, then they're more likely going to communicate about how they can help the business. And then it would link to values, because if your values is to add value, and one of the values is to respect people, then you can kind of see that it dovetails into all 4 of these areas.
It's so interesting once you start delving into this stuff. And I mean, I've been using motivation maps for some time. It's not until you sort of read these books that delve into subjects in such detail, you suddenly realize that the expanse of how you can help lots of different people with on an individual basis, on a team basis, and also organizational basis. It makes, as it grows through the business, it can have an enormous effect.
It massively impacts energy, because it's the realization and understanding of someone's motivations, team motivations and business motivation that kind of releases the energy. And also, there could be things you're not doing because you're not motivated by them that actually the business needs to do. Quite often you'll come across this. I do. Star is very low in someone's process. So shouting about yourself, bigging yourself up is not a UK thing. It's not a British thing. But actually, sometimes that's exactly what a company needs to do. It needs to go in for awards. It needs to get itself above the carpet and get noticed. Doing something that you don't enjoy because it's your lowest motivation can be a biggest impact on your business.
Yes. And is there any other particular, specific motivations that you see are typically lacking within organisations?
Well, your friend is usually quite low. Star and friend I find are quite low. So usually you've got to be aware that actually you need to build relationships with your staff. And the energetic shifts, actually, if you look at organisations, there's three types of energies going on. There's the fast-paced energy, or futuristic, which is leadership. So this is where we're going. Then you've got the managers that are stuck in the middle, who have to take the crazy ideas of all these leaders and make them work on a day-to-day basis. So that's calculated risk. And then you've got the employees that actually we don't want to move forward. We're happy with things as they are. And they're past orientated. So you've got these different energies running through your business. So you can quite quickly see that a leadership team that's a bit too gung-ho is going to actually isolate the staff, because they like things as they are. They don't like a lot of change. So they're not involving them early enough. There's a disconnect on engagement in the business straight away before the change occurs. So it's understanding. So the analogy I use for that, when I was at Fitness First, when we used to make massive changes to changing rooms and God knows what else, when we had a lot of building works, we could just start it and that would cause us loads of mayhem, or we could go, right, this is what we're looking to do, this is the disruption it's going to cause, this is what it looked like afterwards, we're just letting you know. And that's so important. I mean, back in the day when I was in my retail business, we had numerous refits of our stores, and the important bit was about letting everyone know, customers and staff know, why you're doing it, because if they know why you're doing it, because at the end it's going to be better, and why it's going to be better and in what ways it's better, then they're going to be far more accepting that when there is the turmoil, when it's going on, they'll say, well, I know it's bad at the moment, but I'm going to stick with it because I know what it's going to be like in the future. Yeah, and that's exactly right, and that's what happens. That's what you should do in business. If we're going to have a bumpy ride, if we're going to survive, we need to do X, Y, Z. It's not going to be comfortable. There's going to be lots of changes, but actually, it's to secure your jobs going forwards.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all the defender profiles who don't like a lot of change, relax. I'm involved. I know what's going on. There's no surprises for me. But that invariably doesn't happen because change happens so fast and so quick that there's no consideration for the workforce a lot of the time.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think maps bring into the scenario is that we're able to measure and put a number on motivation, which is up until now you haven't been able to do. We can measure, profitability and all the other things within a business, but how do you measure the energy, the motivation, or the energy within a business? And if you can, map it before, map it afterwards, then you actually can get a measure of where it's going and whether what you're doing is actually helping the business.
Yeah, you get the metrics on it. And also I've seen staff not leave a company when they were going to leave as well, where they've saved people, key people, simply by recognizing their motivations and adopting a different strategy. And it could be, I had a situation where someone moved from an open plan office to, they put them in their own office because they thought they deserved it. And actually that was the worst thing they could have done because they had friend profile.
Right.
And they wanted to be in the community of people. And that's where they got their energy and their ideas for the marketing. So this map identified it and stopped them doing actually a strategy that would have made that person leave. And that's, Sorry,
you're absolutely right, and you can get all these stories, and you know what? I've just my elder brother, which I spent a lot of time working with in over the years. We don't now, but he's only just done a motivational map, and now I suddenly see why we generally got on well most of the time, but I know when we didn't, and now I know why, because my builder's low, it always has been, I think. And his is still up there, and it's not about money for money's sake. It's just that what drives them. He's very competitive, and I'm not that way inclined. And my searcher and his basically are at conflict all the time.
I can see.
If we had this information 10 years ago, it'd have been completely different, I'm sure.
Well, I see that. You see that in teams as well. Look at teams with builder low and searcher high. You say you're giving too much away for nothing, and they go, we do tend to do that. Like, well, that's why. So start putting a value on what you do.
And I see that a lot in business owners I work with that are searcher driven and builder low, so that like you say, they're undervaluing what they're doing all the time. Not
charging for giving too much away, and then they wonder why they're stressed. Because their business isn't where it should be financially.
That's right.
It does happen, but it just really helps, I think, because also you made a very valid point just a minute ago. It actually depersonalizes it. It's not me guessing what Mark's motivations is. Actually, it's you telling me, right now I know that, and it's constructive. We can deal with it.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it's not about changing anybody. It's actually accepting that's the situation and making the best of it.
Yeah. Well, there's an expression that you can't motivate someone. You can only create the environment for them to be motivated.
Yes.
And that's a subtle difference. Okay, so you can only find out and then ask them. Okay, that's your motivation. How are you going to get that fed in this business?
Yeah.
What do we need to do to make sure that motivation thrives?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of reverse psychology, I'll be honest.
Yeah. So what we've talked about here is there's obviously a strong link between motivation and engagement. And we could talk about this all day because we're that sort of people, but I'm sure the people listening will think, well, they're going to go on all day about motivation, but actually, engagement is important. So just to wrap things up, Steve, what I'd like from you is maybe 3 tips from you for someone that's a reluctant leader, someone maybe that's been in is in a position of leadership or thinking about taking that position. How can they use the information that we've just been talking about in their role?
Well, first thing, if you're a leader, stay true to yourself. Don't be bullied into doing things you don't want to do. There's an expression, I think, and I think someone said, don't try to fit in. I think it was Andy Harrington said, don't try to fit in. You were born to stand out.
Yeah.
So as a leader, you stand out. You're the person, the leading light for the team. So you've got to get them to follow you. So you've got to work hard to make sure that they can follow you and that they believe in you. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 would be good, interesting. What tip number 2 would be? Don't believe everything everybody tells you. Evaluate it for yourself. You know, I remember when I started out coaching, I took some people literally because they were the gurus. I suppose we're in that situation now. They don't listen to everything we say. Make your own mind up on stuff.
Yeah.
Third tip would be whatever you do, enjoy it, and if you don't, do something else.
And that's a great way to wrap things up, because at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then why continue doing it? Look for something that is going to sort of fire you up, energize you, and motivate you. Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you, Steve. This has been really interesting. I'm sure we'll talk again at some point, a bit more detail about some other leadership things that would help the listeners. So for now, it's thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been a privilege, Mark.
Thank you for listening today. As action leads to outcomes, make sure you make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe at thereluctantleader.co.uk, where you'll find links to all the past episodes, blogs, and how you can get in touch with me. Until next time, bye for now.